I'll call to order this meeting of the Bloomington Commission on Sustainability. This is our December regular meeting, and it is Tuesday, December 13th, 2022 at 6:05 p.m. Will our secretary please call roll?
Oh yeah.
Caitlin Edwards. Here. Matt Flaherty.
Here.
Anya Jane. David Maynor.
Here.
Sean Mia. Najla Radson. Joe.
Here.
Nolan Henderson.
Here.
Alicia Harding. Emma Ferguson. And I'm done.
And did you get Angela already?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so I see that we do have a quorum. Thank you for that. So today's agenda was...
Hey, hold on. Nope.
Did you not read? Oh, yes, you know what? You're right. Apologies. Thank you. So we do have a new member, John Eldon.
Okay. I haven't gotten the email yet, so I don't have the agenda yet.
Okay.
I don't know who to blame, but it's the
So,
computer.
so for roll call sake, would you mind John Eldon?
Here.
All right, thank you.
John, how do you spell your last name?
E-L-D-O-N.
Great. Welcome.
Thank you.
Excellent, indeed. All right, so the agenda was also just distributed by email a few minutes ago. It was available on the shared drive, and I think it was posted to the city's webpage as well. It just wasn't distributed by email, so apologies for that. I do have it up now for review. We can take a moment to read through it and then see if there are any objections to it as presented.
Hello.
One question. Sometimes when we have a new member, like we kind of do like a slightly lengthier introduction or something, or like folks can kind of say something about their, I don't know. We've done that sometimes in the past. Maybe it's
Yeah.
useful for.
That's in the report for the chair section.
Oh, okay.
Just for, allocating time for that.
Oh, there it is. There's the welcome. Yeah, thank you.
If that
Great.
works for you,
That's,
yeah.
That works.
We can move it, okay.
No, that's good.
All right, so if everyone had enough time to read through it, or maybe Nigel, I'll give you one more moment.
The agenda?
Yeah.
Yeah, I already looked through it.
Okay, all right. In that case, are there any objections to approving the agenda as shown on the screen share? All right, that is approved, thank you. So we can go on to approval of the meeting minutes. We can actually start with the October meeting minutes, which weren't approved at our preceding meeting. So is there any objection to approving the October meeting minutes as are always uploaded to the Google Drive as well in the meetings folder? Or any corrections, I should say. All right, so no corrections. Seeing none, those minutes are approved as uploaded. And then similarly for our last meeting, our November meeting, are there any corrections to those minutes? All right, seeing none, those are approved as well. That will bring us on to public comment. Members of the public will each have 3 minutes to speak. Please indicate your desire to do so by either raising your hand if you're in the room, or I'm going to see if we have any attendees on Zoom. I will stop the share. All right, we do have one virtual attendee, and if you do wish to comment, you can just use the raise hand feature, or if you're unable to locate it, you can type into the chat. All right. Seeing no takers, that will bring us on to our report from Chair. So the first thing, let's see, I think the first thing I'll do is we'll give that opportunity to welcome our new member, John Eldon. If you're interested, you can take a moment to say anything about yourself that you would like to introduce yourself. If not, we can do that offline.
Well, I've been in Bloomington about 5 years. Right now I teach at IU, various environmental science, I work at Landscape Services. I worked, hopefully will continue to work with the campus farm. Currently in a bit of a we'll see. Have done some sustainability stuff with invasive species and things like that on campus, and kind of wanted to see what was happening outside of campus. So found this and thought, why not? Yeah, I spent a year doing construction in town, solar panels and the like before teaching. So not entirely defined by IU, I don't think, but that's where most of my time has been lately. So trying to branch out from there.
Cool. Welcome. Good to have those experiences presented here as well. Yeah, then I guess we can go ahead and go on to the two items that I had wanted to mention. The first is that we did have the presentation of the annual report to council this past Wednesday. I think it went well. And there was just one question from Councilmember Piedmont Smith about the UN SDGs, which she was not familiar with. So we just did a little explaining of what they are and then what role we intend for them to play on the commission. So that was good. And then the second was, you know what, I didn't note it down and I can't think of it off the top of my head. So I'm going to forego the second point and mention it if there's an opportunity when I recall. So that concludes the report from the chair. Are there any questions on that report?
What was her reaction to the SDGs?
Oh, I guess neutral. Just once she understood, she saw the value of it and just agreed.
Okay.
I circulated the SDGs website
Oh, okay.
after that comment with the members and a few comments
Okay.
about how in the global community in particular, this is the dominant framework for thinking about sustainability, and yeah, just as a follow-up. So council members did all receive that.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. Seeing none, we can go ahead and go on to our report from ESD. If you would, McKellen, will you be fielding that?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, I will. So three things. The first, Alex and I recently attended the Greater Indiana Award ceremonies because the city of Bloomington was awarded a Leadership in Public Service for Transportation. That was an award that recognized us for the Climate Action Plan and the efforts to electrify the city's fleet and install EV infrastructure. So that was just this last Thursday, and that was really exciting. The second thing I was going to highlight, since I haven't been here for the last couple commission meetings, and the last time I was here I talked to you guys a little bit about Zero In, just kind of following up on that. I'm currently working with our TDM, our Transportation Demand Manager in our department, to develop a kind of community-wide initiative to boost household registration. We're at roughly almost 100 households for registration right now. But we also really want to boost that before Earth Day, and so I'm working with Rotary right now on an initiative across 3 chapters in Bloomington. A few neighborhoods are enrolled. We have 1 Greek chapter from IU, so that's really exciting. And we are planning to have a Zero In showcase as a part of our Earth Day celebration. So we're hoping to keep making progress on that. And then, yeah.
Is there any kind of marketing campaign for that?
We're kind of thinking through that right now while we think through what a community-wide initiative might look like. I'm gonna sit down with Lauren as well and kind of think through like a small budget for Zero In so that we can kind of boost registration and kind of think about how to incentivize participation in an environmental way. So yeah, that's all something that we're thinking about right now, but not sure. Yeah.
Any plan on targeting faith communities?
Yeah, we have. I've met with representatives from Faith in Place, and so they have a team registered, and as of I think 2 weeks ago, they had presented to some congregations, and we're planning on getting some teams enrolled as well. So it seems like we have like a lot of groups that are very interested in it. It's just kind of like slow moving in terms of getting people to like sit down, join teams, register, and kind of follow through with that. But yeah, in terms of a variety of community groups, it seems like there's a lot of interest. So
Yeah, I just know there's multiple churches. My synagogue has
Yeah.
solar panels on it, so those are
Yeah.
some of the lower hanging fruit. Like
yeah, that was one of the first groups that I was able to talk to was Faith in Place. I think there was another name for it as well, but it's across multiple congregations that are interested in sustainability initiatives. And I talked to 2 people that were like a part of that group, and they kind of spread it through a lot of the congregations. So
Solarize might be an easy one to do as well.
yeah, somebody recently told me to reach out to them as well. So yep. And then lastly, another thing that I am working on right now is a new greenhouse gas inventory. We're doing a whole community-wide greenhouse gas inventory. The last one was done in 2018 for the city. I'm hoping to be done with this one by April of next year. That depends on how quickly I could get responses for data requests, but it will encapsulate 2019, 2020, 21, and 22 greenhouse gas emissions. So it's going to be pretty extensive and hopefully can highlight some of the trends in terms of our emissions. Also, it's going to highlight our CAP commitments and progress in the last few years and how that corresponds to our greenhouse gas inventory, given that the last inventory that we did, we didn't have a climate action plan. So that's another exciting thing to look for.
Thank you. That is
Questions on
exciting.
that? Thank
Yeah,
you.
are there any questions on that report? All right. Thank you again.
Thank you.
I actually do have one question that's
Yeah.
more technical and relevant to this meeting. Is there a video feed? Is the OWL normally used for the virtual portion of our meeting? Because presently we don't have video, we just have audio on for the Zoom attendees.
That's a great question.
I think in the meantime, oh, perfect. It looks like it's starting up. Thank you very much. All right. So I think that will conclude that report if there are no further questions. And then we can go ahead and go on to our report from Council Ex Officio, Matt, if you would.
Yeah, of course. And just for John's benefit, I serve on the City Council as an at-large representative. The council, like a lot of our boards and commissions, has I guess flip that. BCOS has an ex officio seat for a council member. Not all commissions have that, but a good number of them do. Some of those with statutory authority, like the Plan Commission, which has a council seat, and others like advisory commissions like this have that similarly. So anyway, that's my particular designation here. And I'll just note that those terms are 2-year terms, like it is for most folks. And this is the end of my 2-year term as the council ex officio seat on BCOS. I might still be here in January as well, and be redesignated to that seat, but it really depends a little bit on what other members want to do. And historically, Councilmember Gallo has also sat on this commission for a long time. So if he wanted to do that, or Councilmember Piedmont Smith wanted to, we'd have some sort of discussion, and we're, for the most part, pretty collegial about like these seats and how they go. Like, so I don't, I'll just mention that in case I'm not here in January as the council designee. Though I would be happy to be. First, just a note that I usually let y'all know about my monthly constituent meetings. Those are the third Mondays of the month this year. I think I'm gonna probably keep that the same going next year, but that'll be 6 days from now, December 19th at 5:30 p.m. Via Zoom. All residents of the city are welcome to attend, and the details are on the council's calendar. If you go to the council's webpage, you can find them there. We are in the midst of a sort of dizzying flurry of legislation at the council at the moment. Just extraordinarily, an extraordinary amount of stuff we're trying to cram into the end of the year. And so I'm just going to kind of run down the list of some things we've been working on, and I'm happy to go answer questions or go deeper. Many of them have a sustainability nexus of some kind, but of course, as you all know, sustainability is very broad. So it depends on how you want to think about it or define that. So I'll just kind of run through the list of things we considered either in the last week or two, or that are yet to come up tomorrow or in our last meeting of the year on the 20th, or 21st rather. So we heard and approved a year-end appropriation ordinance that's kind of a maintenance admin type of thing that shifts money around to balance funds where they need to be balanced at the end of the year based on what actual expenditures looked like. There's always some unexpected things and surpluses in other places. So we heard and approved that, and that included some extra appropriations for things like the Jack Hopkins Social Services Committee, which essentially is a grant-making entity for local nonprofit organizations. We heard and authorized through ordinance general obligation bonds in around $27 million, once those were purchased, to invest in substantial public safety upgrades, in particular police headquarters, fire station number 1, which is the one that's temporarily relocated right now by the Beeline, and fire station number 3 renovations, which is the one up on IU campus. Technically, we have not appropriated those monies yet, and there's still some ongoing debate about among the council about the proposed plans from the administration about where to locate those facilities. It's kind of this combination of how to fit in all of those needs within our bonding capacity and that sort of thing. So I'm happy to talk more about that if folks want. But the proposal from the administration is to co-locate the police and fire headquarters in the Showers building on this other side that CFC currently owns and is occupied by rental tenants. And this is in response to really floodplain issues and really outdated buildings where the police headquarters are now, where the fire station 1 and headquarters were flooded, and they're going to renovate that building, but they can't use the basement anymore, so they're losing space, some stuff like that. And to wrap that up, I guess, the bonds, the general obligation bonds, they're covered by the city's general revenues, but in particular, we had designated a little over $2 million a year from the economic development, maybe not even quite that much, I forget the number, but from the economic development local income tax increase that was passed earlier this year, there was a portion of that that was agreed at the time would be designated for bonding capacity for these investments. We adopted via resolution the City of Bloomington's Americans with Disability Act transition plan. So there's a Council for Community Accessibility that works with staff member Michael Shermis and others in the community on all issues accessibility, and they've put together a transition plan to try to address the many gaps we have between ADA and even better than ADA sort of needs in the community. So that was great that we adopted that, and they've done a lot of hard work on that. We have yet to hear this week a Unified Development Ordinance overlay for the Hopewell neighborhood district, which is where the old hospital site was. So council had worked with the administration previously to advocate for some changes there to have a more walkable environment and more pedestrian scale design standards around buildings and that sort of thing. And so they've developed a zoning overlay that is being considered for the Hopewell neighborhood. I expect that to pass, and it's in response to council requests. And then a related rezoning map to update and reflect that. We are considering probably next week a rezone petition from the county to possibly move the jail to the southwest side of town. Some property right off the interstate and Fullerton Pike that the county commissioners would like to build a new jail at. And it requires rezoning and council approval because it is not an allowed use within the current zoning district. There's a lot wrapped up in that one, including the fact that the commissioners have an option to purchase that property that expires at the end of the year. I imagine they could extend it, but that's so hearing that potentially in one night next week. I would be in favor of postponing it. Let's see. We are also considering tomorrow a resolution to agree to the formation of a capital improvement board for a convention center expansion, which has been discussed for 5 years or so now. It's why the food and beverage tax was passed some years ago, was to primarily for the purpose of expanding the convention center. There have long been some challenges between the executive bodies of the city and county on agreeing what that structure would look like to govern and manage that. It all kind of was paused during COVID. We sort of took a break on all that, and appropriately so, I think, but it's sort of back in conversation, and there's some disagreement between the mayor's administration and the county commissioners, at the very least, I suppose the county council as well, about the correct body to sort of usher that forward. There's the possibility of a 501c3 being formed, or this capital improvement board, which is a sort of state statute defined process that's city county combined, but primarily county driven, and I think oversimplifying, I think there's concern in the mayor's administration that it's kind of too much delegated to the county when the vast majority of the revenues and the sort of location, all that, are in the city that would go to support that. So anyway, we're considering a resolution about whether we agree to enter into this capital improvement board or not. That's another one where I'd like more time. There's been extraordinarily little discussion with county about it, for something that's so impactful. That's most of it. I know that's a lot. If there are questions, I'm happy to answer them. There's a lot of high impact things sort of happening at the moment.
What was the primary driver for the proposal for a new jail?
Yeah, so I believe we are in some sort of like consent decree with the federal government right now based on overcrowding in the existing jail. That's been in place for 5+ years. Like there's a I don't know a ton about this because it's county government, but like it's possible I misstate something, but that's my understanding anyway, is that we were sort of ordered to address overcrowding, and we, the community, were sort of ordered to address overcrowding, and maybe, I don't know if it was only overcrowding or if there was kind of a standards of, the facilities kind of concerns as well. But I do know that there's folks in the community, advocacy groups or others that are still pushing for renovation of the existing jail, for instance. That building was only built in the 80s. I have concerns around transportation insecurity and getting to the interstate and Fullerton Pike, especially for a population that is in the jail. They're probably disproportionately folks who don't always have access to vehicles, either for themselves or for, upon release, for instance, or to for friends and family. So, yeah, lots of questions there, but it's driven by this again, consent decree with the federal government, I believe, and there's a possibility that, the federal government could enter and just take over the whole process and initiate something if we don't do something. So something needs to be done, and it's sort of been a long time.
Would it be a federal or state property, or would it be private?
It'd be county government property, yeah. So they have an option to purchase.
It out, it would be county run.
County run, yeah. Yeah, in the same way it is now. Like it wouldn't be like a private prison or something like that, if that's what you're asking. So yeah, it would function much the same as the current county jail. It would just be I think a larger building. I was talking to Councilor Jeff McKim, county councilor, the other evening. He mentioned that there's a lot of operational challenges and inefficiencies in the current jail based on a 2-floor system. There's just a lot of protocols around elevator use and security and other stuff that are a challenge, I guess. So it's a bit more of a, 1-story building with room for expansion, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
In the southwest side of town. Yeah.
Multiple floors in a jail is a really big security risk in jail design. My father was a guard at a jail until he retired, and he retired 10 years ago, and at that time they still had it was still overcrowded in River County Jail.
Oh,
yeah.
wow, yeah.
And anyways, as you can imagine, if you get locked in a stairwell and there's a fire, and you can't really keep that stairwell unlocked if it's the primary purpose of the facility is a jail. So that's my understanding of, having multiple floors. There can be a risk.
Yeah. And
Even running, like a fire drill, it's a protocol to unlock all of those doors. Well, you have multiple stairwells that are all unlocked at the same time. That, balancing the safety risk versus the security risk. So, yeah, usually you want one flat without those other.
Well, they break them out into different floors for the cell blocks anyway.
Sure.
But no elevators. You're right.
Yeah. So, and the other, criticism or sort of item for discussion I've heard is maybe there's not been enough talk around diversion and like appropriate ways to limit the number of people coming in instead of sort of expanding to meet what is the status quo level of
What are drug offenses? What are health issues?
Right. So
Are
just
we addressing it in a sustainable way.
Right. I mean, obviously, we're the one of the most incarcerated countries on the planet, probably the most among like rich, wealthy nations. So yeah, there's a lot there. There's for the council, it's kind of this question of our role as well. Like it's not just it's not our responsibility to do all this, but it's coming to us around this rezone in particular with that location. But like some of those issues give me pause in approving it. It isn't what's envisioned in the comprehensive plan. I don't think that is like fully dispositive. It's a really compelling need for the jail, but I have lots of questions about alternatives, not just renovation and how seriously that's been considered or not. What does that actually look like? What does it entail? It's hard to renovate something when it's in use, obviously, but what other locations are there? I think the county had property south of Catalent as well, which is a lot more accessible. It's not downtown, but still on transit lines, pedestrian, accessible more or less from a lot more of the city. So
Have they submitted a publicly accessible business plan or proposal?
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, there's also some concern too, being so far away from the courthouse.
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
yeah, it's much more difficult to not just bring somebody upstairs.
Yeah, I've heard folks in the legal community that work in that space like are not a fan of the proposal, but that's secondhand. I'm curious.
Because
I
there
hope
would
they
be so
share
much
more.
transportation infrastructure that we would need, either deputies to transport or, you know,
Relocate
exactly,
things there,
yeah.
you know, whatever it is. So yeah, it's another thing where I feel like it's the gravity of the decision is such that it probably warrants more extensive engagement and conversation, and like that hasn't been the approach that was taken. So both for the Capital Improvement Board and the rezone, I have a hard time like voting yes on something if I don't feel confident in where we're headed. Like, so it doesn't mean I wouldn't vote yes for those things, but I'd prefer more extensive deliberation and collaboration prior. And I don't think either is so pressing that it needs to be decided before the end of the year, but I'll hear more tomorrow and the week after.
So there has not been a full analysis or a business plan or proposal submitted, but you said when is city council voting?
Next week, potentially on the rezone. Yeah, I'm not sure how much of those types. I think they've done a lot of that kind of work, but I don't know how many alternatives they've scoped out. And again, I've heard that the renovation wasn't seriously considered, and I don't know why. I do have questions about that. I think they haven't shared those materials necessarily or all of that because it's not necessarily, material to the rezone petition itself. They did submit like 1,300 pages of like environmental assessment of the site because there's lots of karst features. So a lot of it's not buildable and other sensitive environmental issues, but like I think there's enough of it that's like 25 acres, so there's enough of it that's buildable that they feel good about that. So they submitted all those materials to us. But
So it's more of a zoning approval issue than
Yeah.
the purpose behind it.
yeah, but although uses are defined and categorized as allowed or not in certain zones in our development ordinance for our reading. Yeah.
High occupancy residency. So with the
That's a specific use, yeah, or maybe just institutional of some kind. But yeah, it's that site was sort of designated or meant to be an employment center, type of thing, ideally. Anyway, so
Thank you.
Other questions on the report?
Yeah, they were double, triple bunking 10 years ago before my dad even retired in the jail. So I think there's definitely some sustainability questions about and equity questions about having, people who are incarcerated in not enough space. So
Absolutely.
I think there's, both sides. And Bloomington's growing. So more people, more problems.
I've heard from some folks that some of those numbers have gone down actually over
Sure.
like recent years. So I don't know. I don't have that data on hand, but like I'm not sure if the issue is the same as it was or like when the extent of the overcrowding. But yes, I agree that is a humanitarian issue that needs to be addressed. But yeah.
I do want to ask if I may.
Mhm.
Did all of the items that you mentioned have the objective of being decided by the end of this calendar year?
Basically, yes.
Okay.
There were reasons why the administration wanted to bond before the end of the year. I think in response to generally rising interest rates, and then in particular the basis of some meetings that I don't know if they're Fed meetings exactly, or if there's something that informs the Fed meetings that might have led to rates going up through this month. So they really wanted to get that through.
Okay.
The year-end appropriations, yes. So we're actually going to have an ordinance to appropriate the now authorized and purchased bonds. Or like money from those sold bonds rather, next week. And so that too, I think that, I don't know why it has to be appropriated immediately. I guess like the bond investment community gets uncomfortable when money's been appropriated, authorized and bonds have been sold, but money has not yet been appropriated. So keeping those as close in time together would be good. The Capital Improvement Board, the commissioners passed like this resolution that says it will go into effect once approved by the city council, but if we don't do so by the end of the year, it will terminate.
Okay.
So they set that timeline for us there. They have an option to purchase on the property for the county jail that expires at the end of the year. So most things, yes, most all.
Okay.
We did postpone something until next year that did not need to be heard. having to do with neighborhood greenways, which I actually mentioned last meeting here. So that's been, we had one meeting about that, but then we postponed it to sometime early in 2023.
Okay. Good to know.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you for that report. That did actually remind me of the other item that I had wanted to note was that there are, I believe, 5 commissioners' terms that expire this coming January. You had mentioned that yours was also one. So that was, I guess, one thing to remind everyone of, those whose terms are expiring, to be thoughtful of that. And the second was, it made me aware that I am not familiar with the process of expiring terms. I know, are you part of the committee that does the appointments for this commission?
No. So
Okay.
I can weigh in on this, though, if that's helpful.
Okay, that would be
so
great, actually.
We have three-person council committees that handle all the board and commission interviews and recommendations for appointment from the council side. We have about half of the appointments in the city, not all, not quite. And the way we do that as a council is we have these committees that kind of handle that, and then they make a recommendation to the full council. The full council votes on the recommendation, and 99% of the time approves the recommendation for appointment. So, John, I imagine you either interviewed or talked to Isabel Piedmont Smith, Councilmember Dave Rollo, and Susan Sandberg, I think, is the committee. Or maybe they just appointed you.
Maybe, I don't remember the names.
Or were you a council appointment? Or a mayoral appointment, do you know?
Council.
Okay, so yeah, that was them.
The names. I'd have to look it up.
Yeah. And I'll just say from the council side, like, I think there's a general, like, what I would recommend for the folks whose terms are expiring is 2 things. If you want to continue to serve, make sure your application is up to date, and reach out to, submit a new application. It doesn't have to be super extensive, but just explain that you're on the commission and want to continue serving. And then if you're a mayoral appointment, I would reach out to McKaylin and Lauren and say you want to continue serving. If you're a council appointment, reach out to the council office, just council@bloomington.ia.gov, and maybe copy the clerk's office as well, because they're help with administering, and let them know you want to continue to serve, and that'll make its way to us. And I feel like the general feeling is if folks are active and involved, and sometimes we, for instance, check in with staff liaison to say, has this person attended meetings, that sort of thing. And if so, and they want to continue serving, I think general practice is to let people continue, I can't guarantee that for all my colleagues, but I think that's more or less how we tend to approach it. So you should be aware of that, I guess, for those of you whose terms are expiring.
Okay, so does that mean a new application has to be submitted to be considered an applicant for the next term, or is at least highly recommended?
Highly recommended. Like, we
Okay.
use a system called you could speak for this on the staff side, McKaylin, but we use a system called Onboard that IT built, and when we go in to see vacancies and applicants, only applicants applicants get archived eventually. So if you don't have an up-to-date application, it won't show up. And so yeah, I wouldn't think of it as an overly burdensome or tedious thing. It's just brief fill out the form kind of thing.
Right.
We could probably improve that process. In fact, one more mention is that I proposed a formation of a special committee next year with my colleagues to focus on procedure and administrative issues in particular, because we have many that we need fixing, minor code updates to Title II, which could help commissions with things like this, and then overall board and commission reform. We had a report earlier this year from the Novak Consulting Group, which the mayor's office, mayor's administration convened, that had a number of recommendations surrounding board and commissions and how we fill them and operate them. There were some in particular that were related to VCOS and the possibility of combining with the Environmental Commission, for instance. And if anything's been done with that report, it's all been done in the mayor's administration. There's been no involvement of the council, and I think that's a mistake. And I'm worried we're going to get this sort of omnibus board and commission reform ordinance at some point and be left responding to it. I'd rather work together and work with members of boards and commissions and the public to think about what are the changes or improvements we'd like to see. So that's one of the issues that I'd like to see a committee take up to actually proactively work on next year. So hopefully we can improve some of the administrative components around all the boards and commissions work as well.
Excellent.
Mhm.
That definitely answers the question. Thank you for the update, and thank you for the initiative as well on proposing that to council for making all of those updates. I think
There's interest.
I agree, that would be great. All right. Any questions or comments related to that process? Cleared? Is that clear to everybody? Okay. Cool. Thank you again. And that'll conclude our our report from council, and that will bring us on to report from commissioners. One thing I'd like to do, since we are at the last meeting of the year, is maybe in addition to just kind of our last month's activities, just a quick summary of what was achieved basically since our annual report was produced, because that already created a summary that we all, shared with each other, but kind of what everyone's been up to since then to get a status update on where we are on our end of 2022 year goals that we set when we made that report. So with that in mind, we can start with the heat management group, if you would, Sean.
Sure, no problem. At our last meeting, we had give a presentation about her Beat the Heat programs that she coordinated in Richmond and Clarksville, and it was a really informative presentation, and we had a really good turnout. We had people from emergency management, the health department, HAND, Perry Township trustee, and Red Cross. I think that was everybody. And we had really good discussion after the presentation and a lot of good questions. Something that she brought up was urban heat island mapping. She partnered with Kappa Strategies. Is it possible to share my screen?
Yes, actually, are you attending the Zoom meeting as well?
Yes.
Okay. And then screen sharing should be enabled.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay. So she talked about her partnership with Kappa Strategies. They help local communities map their urban heat islands. So it's providing data about microclimates in cities, and they use that with volunteer manpower. And so you can see that all the little dots here, all the cities that have been mapped in the U.S. So there's Richmond and Clarksville is added there. So we would like to submit an application to be in the 2023 cohort. Unfortunately, the deadline is this Friday for the application, and here at the bottom here, it talks about they request that organizations provide a portion of the $15,000 cost to offset the cost of the campaign. It's not required, but your application is probably more likely to be you're more likely to be selected if you do contribute. So, if anybody has any ideas for some money that they can just pull out of a hat by Friday, please let me know. It's not required. If we don't have any matching funds, we're going to go ahead and apply anyway. We do have a lot of, we have a diverse group of organizations in the city of Bloomington and in the county, and I think that will help our application. We also have Dr. Habib that will be helping us as well, who has done this before. So that's about it. At the end of the, did you have a question?
Oh, I have a stupid question just because
Oh, no, there's no stupid question.
there will be some stupid questions until I get caught up to speed.
Okay.
What would we do? What would somebody do with the map of the heat islands?
So once we have the map created for the city, we can target areas that are hotter than others, and we can overlay. We would like to overlay on that map areas that have vulnerable populations, so low-income neighborhoods,
Sure.
or elderly individuals who are socially isolated. All this information can be overlaid from census data.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would target our initiatives in those areas, so the hot areas and the areas that are.
And the initiatives would be like ambient heat, so like tree planting stuff, or
Tree
water
planting.
stations, or what's
We want to coordinate with other organizations that are already have tree planting plans in place. We want to coordinate with them. We don't want to duplicate work that's already being done, but we can target education outreach in those areas, and also we want to work with transportation to see if there's bus stops in those areas, making sure they're shaded, possibly if there's funding, making sure that they have water fountains, those types of things. So once we have a better idea of where the hot spots are in Bloomington, we can coordinate our efforts.
Target cooling centers.
Right. Is that something we could get with drone or satellite data? Like
I'm not
thermal
sure.
imaging's. I don't know what their methods are, but I'm trained as a scientist, so I know that we need more research before it can do anything. I've been saying that my whole career, and I try not to, because you can often start doing stuff with what you have. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You can see in that photo there's a picture of one of the data collection sensors that's mounted to cars, and you can mount them to bicycles. So we're hoping to have a lot of volunteers for the campaign.
I think they specifically go out on
Uh-huh.
more extreme heat days, so it's like very time-specific data collection.
Yeah, it just seems like you could use some remote sensing data to get a pretty good shot, and then spend, that $15,000 on. You can plant a lot of trees for that. I don't. Yeah, I haven't looked into it. I don't know. About it.
Yeah, it's a good question. So it's near surface air and water near surface air and humidity measurements at 3 times the day, and they have an algorithm that interpolates between the routes that things go. I think the granularity is much higher than like what's out there from remote sensing options, but the question of the degree and how much it would impact like policy decision making about resource allocation is like
Yeah,
good question.
The size of
Yeah.
Bronx, Manhattan versus the size of Bloomington. It's like,
yeah.
There's also added benefit that this is a structure that's already
Yeah.
kind of in place.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have a drone with thermal imaging.
No.
Oh, okay.
Well, I mean, there's LiDAR data out there and stuff that's
Yeah.
again, not probably as
That you
high
could
quality,
pull,
but
but-
does demonstrate.
You could pull,
you could
pavement
start with
and
that
tree
and then-
canopy
Sure.
and low income and get a sense of where to start.
Yeah. Well, the data is out there. I think that's a great plan, especially if the application is not selected based on, contributions. Because the 1 week timeline is
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah, we didn't.
It's all right.
realize it
Sometimes.
was coming up so quickly, but
If we wanted
not,
to-
if we don't get it next year, we'll get it maybe.
Yeah, if we wanted to move on some of those activities, might be ways we could, some shortcuts we could, with LiDAR or whatever. If we had tree planting initiatives and wanted to push forward, we could get started prior to getting that.
Well, you're welcome to join our group. We're always looking for more help. So I'd be happy to have you.
You could compare, if you access like national LiDAR data sets too, you could compare like what you can get for like publicly available data versus what a Kappa Strategies map will get you. You can look at some of the existing communities and what their maps look like, and like get a sense of like how different of a scale are we talking in terms of the quality. And
Do they offer example reports?
You can
you
go
know
on
what
this
I mean?
website. They have.
To say like, this is what we would provide. This is what we did for Bronx, as we could do, just to get a sense of, the granularity and whatnot.
I want to interject a moment. Sean, did that conclude your report? Did you have like any more sequentially that you wanted to add to prior to the shift in conversation?
Oh, sorry. The only other thing we talked about was I uploaded to our Google Drive some example ordinances that cities are enacting across the country. We're going to take a look at those and see what we think would fit here in Bloomington. So, yeah, I think that's about it. And as a wrap up for the whole year, our main goal was just to get our group started. I think we've had about 4 meetings now, and each meeting we're growing. So we're pretty pleased with what we've done so far.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, yeah. And excellent work putting that group together.
thank
That's
you.
really impressive that it's so multidisciplinary and you've got such good engagement. I'm glad to hear that it's taking traction.
It really is. Thank you.
Good, yeah. And we can resume the conversation as well. I just wanted to make sure that the report was concluded and that conversation followed. Was there a follow-up thought that you wanted to finish?
You can go to their website and they've got reports and everything that you would be interested in seeing.
Perfect. Other questions, comments? All right, cool. Thank you for that. Would you mind disabling your screen share? Thank you. And then we can go on to the waste reduction working group. If you wouldn't mind, Emma, did you have, or would you like me to display the?
Yeah, if you would.
Yes. Give me just a moment to browse there. And I will share our progress on screen.
So not at the last meeting that we had, but our November meeting, we kind of put together an outline for our compost captain's plan, just kind of like a very short outline. And then in our last meeting, which was yesterday that we met, we kind of fleshed out this plan a lot more. We sat down and we were like, this is a great like outline plan, and then we sat down, went through it all, and added so much more to it. It's still basically an outline, but it's in a much better position to be transformed into a paragraph form that explains more about.
Give me 1 second.
That's okay. But we basically just talk about why the intro and the motivations of like why this program would be beneficial, the structure, so the roles of the captain and the participant, and then we talk about the web portal that would be the place for communications and resources. We talk about what an administrator's role would be and their guidelines for maintenance and upkeep, and then just startup outreach and things like that. So we kind of went through and put this together, and maybe in the next year it would be a goal to put it all into like paragraph form to flesh out all of these ideas even more. So that's what we did at our last meeting, if you want to do the summary.
Cool. Sure. Yeah. So this is as far as one of our 3 goals was the compost captains. The other was investigating the potential addition of carton recycling to the city's municipal curbside collection. Found out that Republic is the city's current recycling processor, and there is an organization called the Carton Council that basically advocates for and then tries to connect municipalities and providers to carton recycling opportunities. And they said that Republic does not do carton recycling anywhere nationally. So it was essentially carton recycling, like the multi-layered. Tetra Pak is the largest manufacturer of them.
Like milk jug type?
Yeah. Yeah. Soup broths, yeah.
Like soy milk.
Dairy substitutes. Exactly.
It says
So-
recyclable,
But then you look at the fine print,
but you have to ship it off yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, to the facilities.
So that essentially was a dead end for the, I guess, the way the existing model is set up. There wasn't a clear way to incorporate that, but there are, of course, different ways to make things happen. So we're going to continue to see if there are any other alternatives into next year that could potentially function for that. And then the other goal was working with the Monroe County Solid Waste Management District to help advertise the composting drop-off service at their recycling centers. So we did put together some signing for that and provided it to Executive Director Tom McGlasson of the Waste Management District. So the district is also going through a rebranding process, and so there's some delays on that in terms of getting the new colors and logo scheme set up for printing signing for, but we essentially delivered an initial draft of signing for that. So,
I hate to dominate the conversation, but I do need to catch up, and this is something I have some background in. Could you all tell me a little bit about kind of food waste or yard waste? You mentioned neighborhood green waste. Where are we at? What are we aiming for? Like, is this setting up a lot of backyard composting? Is it?
So the city in their climate plan wanted to reduce food waste, was it food waste? Or no, just waste in general by 40%. And so we saw an opportunity for food waste. So we have an urban farm and we do a lot of composting. We just started taking neighbors' compost or compostable material. And so that's where the compost captain's idea came. And the city has also initiated this with restaurants as a pilot program.
But would it be collection points where people bring their waste, or helping everybody set up a backyard system?
So there are already people in neighborhoods that are already composting. And people, they'd be able to accept maybe 1 or 2 other families. So we want to use people who are already doing it, not creating new, because not everybody's going to do it correctly or even want to do it. But if we can keep all that food waste in the neighborhood and turn it into soil, yeah, because there is a company that Joe works with.
yeah, I think probably the best way to answer your question is we can respond to the scope of like the waste reduction working groups activities with respect to composting. But if you want like a full download of what's happening with composting in the community, I can give you that offline because there's a fair amount to cover. But in short, what was just referenced is Earthkeepers Compost is the only current organics food waste hauler and processor in the county. So what they have is a couple of different services, but what we wanted to do is propose something that was more self-managed micro scale that could maybe have a little bit of support from the city, either in financial or administration time. And then this is an outline of what that could be, that could potentially be proposed to council or the Department of ESD as something that could potentially be supported, that already has a refined structure to it. One other step that we hope to take or plan to take for the next iteration of this before making our full draft is also consulting with, there are a few individuals in the community who have in the last probably 10 or so years attempted some variant of this to have essentially an interview with them and get some lessons learned for making improvements in lessons learned from those experiences.
Are there any funds associated with the city wanting to reduce waste by 40%? Like, is there a pot of money that could go towards, like, there's in-vessel composting is a really cool technology for food waste, or is it
Again,
starting from scratch?
The shortest possible answer to that question is there is the ED Lit that Matt just mentioned. So there's a local income tax that's going to have money allocated. And then the other thing that I'll recommend for doing offline is the city's climate action plan has a whole bunch of information about sort of where things stand and what the future plans are. And there's also a report that was performed by a consultant in 2016 called the Kessler Report that does waste management, did a waste study for the whole county. So again, things that we can talk about offline that I think will warrant a lot of time that I think wouldn't be as pertinent to the scope of the meeting. But does that feel at least your questions with respect to the working groups?
I'm just trying to get up to speed.
Activities, right?
I can touch super quickly on the budget. There is a budget, and I can send you like what was approved for our budget for this year. But like he was talking about with Earth Keepers, we have compost money set aside for a Compost Up Downtown program. That's for restaurants. This year's or 2023's budget also has a certain amount of money set aside for multifamily recycling and for composting, and so those will kind of become programs that the city has money set aside for right now. And then there's already dedicated funding towards the restaurant composting program. But yeah, what that will look like moving forward is still kind of to be determined, I think. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess that concluded the waste reduction working group. Also, annual summary as well. Any questions on those activities? All right. So that will bring us to our last working group, which is just transition. I will stop my share. And then Najla, did you?
Yeah, I just sent it to Michaela.
Okay.
She's gonna pull it up on her end. So the annual update on the Just Transition Group is that besides me, our other Just Transition member will not be on this commission starting in January. That was Alicia Hardy, and so I also decided, based on what we learned in the last couple of months about outreach that other groups are doing in Bloomington that were very similar to what we had planned, that as the one remaining member of the working group, that before pitching the Just Transition Working Group to the commission, that I consider thank you, revising the goals of the group, keeping in mind that there already are several organizations and bodies and entities in our area doing the kind of outreach that we had initially been planning to do in this working group. So what hasn't changed is the overall principles and the principles and the scope as far as SDGs of the group. So I'm going to go over that, as well as my suggestions for how I think this working group should, the next steps that we should take in 2023. Okay. So I pasted the purpose of our commission here, taken from the ordinance that set up this commission, as a reminder of the importance of the economic and well-being and health sphere of our commission's purpose, as maybe you could minimize that.
Yeah, give me just a second.
Okay.
It left the meeting somehow.
That's cool.
And it's also somehow still
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Justin, can you see it on there now?
Yes,
Great.
it's showing on there too.
Great. Okay. So I pasted the purpose of our commission here as a reminder of the importance of the economic and well-being and health sphere of this commission's purpose as set out in the ordinance that established it. So the overall purpose of the and I guess I'll read the bits that are the most relevant, but as it says, a sustainable community seeks to enhance the socio-environmental economic well-being of our community. And then I've also highlighted the part about improving livability and the mission being to promote sustainable socio-environmental economic well-being and of all its inhabitants. And so these are the key parts of the commission's purpose that has to do with the Just Transition Working Group and with our goals there. And so the overall purpose of this working group is to help further this commission's overall effectiveness in fulfilling our purpose, especially as it regards the sustainability of the socio-economic well-being of our community, as this aspect of sustainability is equally important to environmental health and sustainability, but it has been somewhat overlooked in many of the areas of this commission's work to date. Okay, next slide. So in this working group that's founded on one principle that supports 3 SDGs, all of which lie squarely within BCA's purpose and mission. So the one principle is the Just Transition. It's a global environmental movement led by indigenous rights groups and based on principles including Buen Vivir, which I will talk about more in the next slide, as well as regenerative ecological economics and equitable distribution of resources and power. Buen Vivir it means to live well without living better at the expense of others. This is a synthesizing principle of the Just Transition movement and of the working group. Buen Vivir is a social ecology stance which draws from ancestral conceptions of Sumak Kausai in Quechua and Suma Gaman in Aymara, the 2 most widely spoken indigenous languages in the Andes region of Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia. It has been developed into policies in the People's Climate Summit in Bolivia in 2010 and later in the World Social Forum. Buen Vivir is a new paradigm of thinking of the social and ecological commons both locally and globally, one that is community-centric, ecologically balanced, and culturally sensitive. So of the 17 SDGs, the Just Transition Movement and Buen Vivir principle most closely aligns with these 3. Number 1, no poverty. This refers to eliminating absolute poverty and increasing access to the basic necessities required for human life to all people, regardless of their ability to pay for them. 3, good health and well-being. This SDG is around ensuring that every human being in our community has the opportunity to live a healthy and long life. 10, reducing inequalities. Reduce inequalities. This also refers to poverty, but more to what in economic terms is called relative poverty, which is an indicator of income inequalities and sometimes expressed using Gini coefficients or other indicators. Relative inequality has been recently found to be more impactful to improving overall community health and well-being compared with eliminating absolute poverty in many of the recent books on economics and public health, including the inner level and the spirit level. Next slide. Here is some more detail about how each of the 3 UN SDGs, those 3 SDGs are defined, and some of the suggested targets and indicators get provided by the United Nations website for these goals. So in poverty eradication, as you can see, some of the target actions are to improve access to sustainable livelihoods, opportunities and resources, providing, again, access to basic social services, developing social service protections, empowering people living in poverty and their organizations, addressing the disproportionate impact of poverty on women. And then for SDG 3, this is focused on ensuring healthy lives and promoting well-being for all at all ages. And so again, this is based on, absolute, and ensuring that everyone has access to the same minimum health services and resources required to be healthy at all ages. And then the SDG 10 on reducing inequality, specifically one of the recommended target actions is to progressively achieve and sustain income growth of the bottom 40% of the population that's at a rate higher than the average. And as well as to empower and promote social, economic, and political inclusion of all, respective of demographic traits, as well as economic or other status. And finally, to adopt policies, especially fiscal, wage, and social protection policies that would progressively achieve greater equality. So these are the principles and SDGs upon which this group was founded. I'm happy to discuss these more with anyone interested in attending the first working group meeting in January. I recommend the next step for this working group would be to survey existing public and private data that we can gather. I've already gathered a lot of it. I mean, we have in the working group together with the people who were in it before, but gathered all the data from local studies, focus groups, and reports of, on the main drivers of and indications for tracking and evidence-based policy recommendations around reducing absolute poverty, relative income inequality, housing insecurity, and especially for expanding access to health and well-being for all residents of our community, regardless of their economic or other status. Then we can decide what the most impactful goals for 2023 in keeping with the principles of a just transition and buen vivir might be. Thank you. And then, sorry, I said say thank you too early. I'm not done. Just never mind that. So here are some examples of some of the data that we've already gathered in this group, and actually we did a lot of group analysis on them already. So the first one is the Monroe County Community Health Assessment. And so this is like the CHIP, if you guys have heard of CHIP, I think. It's the program run by the county. And it also works together with IU Health, as you can see here, and the Parks and Rec and Community Voices for Health. And they do a lot of like focus groups, outreach groups. I'm on 2 of them. And basically gathering the data and community input needed to make these sort of important decisions. So that would be one. The next one would be the county health rankings data. This is very valuable data that compares our county's public health data, not just public health factors, but also outcomes, which include economic inequality and housing insecurity. And it gives you very precise quantitative data that you can then compare to other counties in Indiana. So for example, our county, Monroe County, is the very worst in 2 areas that are pretty important to this. The first one is income inequality, and the second one is housing insecurity. Those were the top. This county is the worst in Indiana in those 2 categories. And then the third data source is the City of Bloomington Community Survey. This was compiled by a third party that the city hired, some consultants. They gathered a lot of detailed information about what our community feels is important. And some of their key findings that people want to see action on include many of the items that the Just Transition is working on. So I think these are just some data sources for us to start with that we've already sort of looked over a little bit. But yeah, this will hopefully get the, this gives you all an idea of what the working group was founded on, why it's still important, and where we can go from here. So I will email this presentation to you all so you can all review any of it, as well as check out any of the resources I've mentioned to learn more. And please reply to my email or let me know if you're interested in joining the working group before we plan our January meeting.
Thank you, Najla.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any questions or comments?
If you were going to assign a ranking to your SDGs based on the tasks that are involved, how would you place them? Which one is primary, secondary, and collateral?
So let's see, the three of them, it's the, okay, it's the no poverty, sorry, I've got my screen all messed up. No poverty, oh yeah, health and well-being and reduced inequality. So I would say number one would be one. And I think that's why it's number one for the Sustainable Development Goals as well. I mean, I think there's a reason it's number one because, you know, no poverty is, you know, hopefully, you know, for as far as like a human rights perspective, yeah, hopefully no poverty would be the least we can do.
But you would say that for as far as the outcomes desired for just transition, no poverty would be the top of the line? That would be the primary focus?
Well, I think the outcomes should be determined with the working group members, like the goals should be determined by us. These are just the founding principles and the SDGs that I think the founding principles most relate to in the work that, within the principles that it's based on.
I see.
So as far as goals and outcomes, I haven't done that because I figured that it should be done with the working group members together.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you. Other questions or comments?
Sorry, and then between the other two, health and well-being and reduced inequality, I guess I would say, I mean, they're all pretty related. Maybe just in that order, 1, 3, 10. I actually think they've done a pretty good job, the UN, of kind of placing them already in a decent priority list. So I wouldn't change the order.
Anyone else? All right. Thank you again, Najla, and to everyone on the commission for good work this year. It's good to hear all these reports and status updates. Good to know what everybody's working on and where we're moving. That does conclude our reports from commissioners and brings us on to resolutions for second reading, which is the UN SDGs. Dave, do you want to? Do you?
I just sent you an email. I don't know if you can pull up the picture or not.
I can. Let me do that.
And again, I don't have a number for this resolution, so it will remain XXXX.
In general, resolutions are just numbered sequentially based on when they were in the order of the year. So I don't think we have passed any other resolutions this year, so this would be 2022-01.
Oh, okay. Well, fancy. All right.
So we can add that.
So, conveniently, I was at a project management conference in Las Vegas last week, and you see the PMI Global Summit in the bottom left-hand corner. This is an international conference for project managers. Sustainability was a large player in the themes of this year, and I thought this was an interesting breakout of the SDGs. As you can see how they all actually connect on their focuses. So biosphere, society, economy, most of them are society. But I had never seen this breakout before, and I thought that was fairly interesting. And that might actually help us in categorizing our efforts and coordinating our groups on focuses. So it might be easier to affect multiple efforts in biosphere rather than trying to blend economy into biosphere. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it goes out. Maybe some of the ideas blend. But this was a good example of how the SDGs play an important role internationally across industries, because this is project management is in every industry. Everybody I met is in something else, and France, Germany, Turkey, Croatia. Sorry for today, but everybody else had, great. They're everywhere, and they're all very interested in sustainable goals, as we all are. So I think it's finally time to do a vote on this resolution to adapt ourselves to the international model of the SDGs. I made the changes that we discussed last time, so this should be the exact representation of what we discussed and changed before. I don't know if you have it, or if you want me to just read it.
If you want to start, was it living in Google Drive? Or
I just sent it yesterday to Caitlin. But anyway, resolution 2022-01. Resolution to the Bloomington Commission on Sustainability, because to adopt the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals, hereforth referred to as SDGs, and use them as a framework for categorizing and controlling Commission projects. I know we had some disagreement on this, but I'm not sure it's that important. But whereas all projects must align with at least one, but no more than 3 SDG focus areas to facilitate and controlling project scope, with the option of assigning primary, secondary, and collateral outcomes. Nejla's presentation was a perfect sample of that, and as it develops and they set their goals, they will expose themselves as to whether or not they're going to be the primary, secondary, or collateral outcomes. Whereas SDG icons identifiers will be used to communicate project objectives to partners and third parties. I just gave you an example of that. Global conference, everybody is very familiar with the icons and the how they work. So it's internationally known framework for communicating sustainability projects. Whereas any projects that cannot be categorized using the SDGs must be reviewed by commissioners to assess if the project falls within the purview of sustainability. If it doesn't fit there, it probably doesn't belong here, frankly. Whereas projects that can not identify the primary outcome or focus will be reviewed by the commission to determine if the project should be split into multiple projects or specific objectives should be prioritized. This is to control the scope and to make sure that things don't get too grandiose. Basically, it's helping you not bite off more than you can chew. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Bloomington Commission on Sustainability adopt the SDGs as the primary model for project categorization for all sustainability projects moving forward. Believe this reflects everything that we had discussed before. If there are no further adjustments or corrections, I submit it for a vote.
all right. I do just want to point out, I think that what's shared on the screen does not reflect the modifications that you made. This one does still say as the sole model for the project identification, but in the one that you read, you did say primary.
That was the exact same one I said. Yeah, primary outcome.
Yeah, but it says sole model.
And then now therefore.
You said primary.
Did I? Where is this whole model?
At the very bottom, it says sole model.
Last paragraph.
Second to last line.
Oh, thank you.
You said primary.
Okay, yeah, I did change it here.
I think that is positive, since we also have the climate action plan, which has categories that I think are relevant for thinking about and discussing our work, even if under the umbrella of the SDGs. So, if the updated version we're voting on says primary
Yes.
instead of sole.
Just wanted to make that
Let's
clarification.
change that right now, since we
Do you have the ability
just changed my version.
to edit? like to, it'd be ideal to,
I think we also talked about changing the first whereas it says primary, secondary, and collateral.
Projects must align with at least one but no more than 3.
I think you read with the option of choosing, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's what we wanted.
With the option of assigning primary, secondary. Yeah,
Up there, it just.
yeah, that's the older version.
That's the only one, okay.
Can you email me the version that you currently have?
Yeah, isn't that what I sent that to you.
This is the one that I have.
Sure.
I think we can, knowing that those changes are both included, and just to be able to view them for confirmation, discuss, is there any discussion on this second reading beyond what we discussed at the first reading?
I'm just sending it to you right now. You just pull it up.
Okay.
Can I ask you, do you think the biosphere, society, economy categories are, I think they're very useful, so if we can share the photo in the drive regardless.
Sure.
But do you think, you don't want to put a button in voting because you want to add that at all?
No,
Okay.
that was just a sample of how
It's a good way to look at it because the
Right.
scope is really the hardest part, you know, yeah.
Yeah, no, that was just a sample of how it's being used outside
it's really
of this
useful, yeah.
organization.
In your experience, are people familiar with these on a local level? Internationally, I imagine perhaps more so.
The concept of sustainability is hard enough to share on a local level. Most people think that it is solely environmental. We've discussed that in this very group.
Sure.
The UN's embrace of the 17 principles is a way of giving everybody a baseline for the efforts. And I
Shared,
think really
shared
it's,
language to talk about these things.
yeah. So it's this, that's really what
Whether
we
or
need
not
to
people
communicate.
recognize them, it may be worth introducing them.
Right. So you say sustainable energy, people think green energy, but they're
Right.
not the same thing. The
Yep.
sustainability, this is the marketing message that we really want to get out.
Yep.
And I think that's why why I'm encouraging us to embrace it.
Yep.
It's globally known, if not locally known, but
Yep.
we can work on local.
Yeah, right. That's the point, isn't it?
Somebody else already did global. We can work on
Yeah.
local.
It's just like with our group, heat management, a lot of people don't think of health as being a sustainable
Yep.
project or development.
Totally agree.
Yeah, there's also a lot of resources on the UN SDG website for evidence-based policies, but they called target actions, like I showed in my presentation, for each of these areas to sort of guide our actions and save us all from reinventing the wheel each time we want to help solve one of these problems. We can just look and see, like, first of all, what does the UN say is evidence-based ways to solve these problems?
Yep.
There's just a lot of resources there, and they have case studies of what's been done in other countries, and it's just a good way to sort of leverage and connect our work with the rest of the world and make sure we're gaining knowledge from what's been done in other places and vice versa, maybe.
It's like we can embrace the imperial system of measurement. Or, I'm sorry, the metric system.
right.
We've embraced the imperial, yeah. But if everybody's using meters, we should
a shared
probably go to
framework,
meters.
Yeah,
Right.
sure. Yep. No, it makes sense.
Did you get is that the one I was just saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is the updated version reflecting the option of assigning primary, secondary, and collateral outcomes in the first whereas, and to adopt the SDGs as the primary model for project categorization in the now therefore be resolved. So if there is no further discussion, I think we can call the question on adopting resolution 2022-01 on the UN SDGs. If the secretary will please call, well, we have no virtual attendees, so we can actually do a voice vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, so the resolution is adopted.
Indeed.
4 months.
Right. Which is nice, because that was our end of 2022 year goal, and this is in the final minutes of our meeting.
Nailed it.
Yes.
Awesome.
Really bringing it down. All right. Well, thank you all for that. Yes, please, Matt.
Just to follow up on that, I among the things that they're sort of related items that I pitched for this committee that I think has council buy-in to move forward, which is board and commission reform generally, but also a comprehensive Title II update, and that could include things. So most of the boards and commissions have been created in Title II in Bloomington Municipal Code, and like the mission and how the commissions function have sometimes drifted over time, and this is the type of thing that I think could be considered in city code as well. Like if it's sort of become the framework for BCOS, and if there's other changes that BCOS has had over time, right, that are a little bit different from what was originally proposed when it was created, like we should be thinking about those updates too. So I just wanted to mention that in the context of SDGs as an opportunity.
The Bloomington City Fiber Initiative, reduced inequalities. It's almost everything can fit into one of the SDGs, but to be able to identify it outside of the local area, and to if Bloomington was communicating to another organization and listed out the projects they are working on that are within alignment with the goals, I think they'll be recognized. I mean, I don't want to presume, but yeah, that's what I was saying with the conference. It's bigger than us, bigger than here. So yeah, I think it's the best way to communicate and control the scope and list our projects out. So it's just admin, but it's important. So.
I think I'll know, with respect to John's remark about it not being known locally, this is a good way to introduce it. And if it starts appearing on Commission on Sustainability things, people will be seeing it more than they would be otherwise.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that brings us through item 10 on our agenda, the resolutions for second reading. It does bring us to discussions, not resolutions. We don't have an awful lot of time left. Were there any commissioners who had input for discussions? I do want to just note, I had a follow-up from our last meeting proposal to have a presentation from Earthkeepers Compost. So I did connect with them. They are interested in presenting and proposed maybe a February potential timeframe. So that will probably be revisited in January to make sure it's still good timing, but just wanted to make you aware that that's going to be coming up on the agenda.
Would a site visit make sense? Or is that something I can follow up with them separate?
I think it would probably be at least separate at this point, could potentially be...
Great time to go.
Yeah, well, yeah.
February.
Well, now would definitely not, yeah.
Easy for that.
Yeah. During a meeting time, not be a great time of the year. But yeah, potentially could be
I'll do
discussed
that.
future agenda. And just on that note, usually there's the call for agenda items the week before the meeting. You can email the chairs at any point with agenda items that you want to have added for future meetings. So, seeing no other items for discussion, and presumably no new business as well. All right, presumption's accurate. That does bring us towards adjournment. I will note first that our next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, January 10th, 2023 at 6 p.m. And if there is no objection, this meeting will adjourn. And seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you again, everybody.